Greetings to all of you, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, those still standing, distinguished delegates. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Greetings to all of you. And welcome to the 5th meeting of the Open-Ended Governmental Working Group on the WHO Pandemic Agreement. Speaking on behalf of the Bureau, it is a renewed pleasure for us to be here discussing which would be the last but one possibility for us to finalize this annex. And for that, I will spare you of any comment. I do not think I need to reiterate the need for us to concentrate, focus, advance, and progress on the search for agreed text. Without any further comment, I would now have the pleasure of welcoming the Executive Director of Health Emergencies, Preparedness and Response, Dr. Chikwi. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Tova. Esteemed IGWG co-chairs and vice-chairs, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of member states, colleagues and friends. Firstly, I'd like to convey DG's greetings, who could not be here with us today. However, he is following deliberations and will join us later in the week. We gather today at a pivotal moment, only 100 days away from WHA 79, and only one more formal meeting of IGWG remaining. During the resumed session of IGWG 4, we started yellowing the text, a significant step towards convergence. A clear demonstration that bridging gaps is possible when you move beyond entrenched positions towards convergence. You can find the common ground that transforms our high-level principles into agreed operational elements. As you commence this week's negotiations, I encourage you to focus on resolving the remaining divergent areas. Critical for an operational pathogen access and benefit sharing system with a spirit of collaboration for consensus. I urge you, colleagues, to focus your deliberations on the core areas requiring urgent reconciliation, and in doing so, please be reminded that you are not building from scratch. We already have mechanisms and capabilities that you govern through the EB and the World Health Assembly. I urge you to build on those capabilities and use them. Please do not replicate and do not fragment. The work ahead of us this week will be demanding. I appreciate your commitment to the extended sessions, including the evenings. I hope that we progress towards the ambitious target of yellowing the whole of the text by Saturday. I ask you to look for the middle space, the space where sovereignty meets global solidarity, where you design a multilateral system that promotes rapid, fair, and equitable access and benefit sharing for everyone. Last week at EB 158, we had repeated calls for multilateralism and global health security, and for the principle of universality. The work you are doing has the potential to translate these calls to concrete action, a strengthened pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response architecture with coordinated international collaboration and equity at the center. I extend my thanks to the Bureau for your leadership, relevant stakeholders for your active engagement, and you, most importantly, the member states for your commitment and dedication to a safer, fairer, more equitable and healthier world for all of us. We, the Secretariat, led by our Director General, are here to support you every step of the way. I wish you a productive and successful meeting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chikwi. Please convey to the DG and to the entire Secretariat our appreciation for the continued support and the hard work. Allow me also to indicate that co-chair Matthew Harper will join us later on. He was not able to be here at the very beginning, but he also sends his best regards and warm greetings to all of you to this 5th edition of the IGWG. We shall now proceed to consideration of the agenda and program of work. You have received a proposal for the agenda, document A/IGWG/5/1. 1. And I will now open the floor for those delegations that wish to have an intervention or put forward words before we proceed to the formal adoption of the agenda. Is there any delegation wishing to speak before we formally adopt the agenda or to indicate any possible objection to the proposed agenda? The floor is open, please. Zimbabwe to be followed by Mexico.
Thank you for the floor, Chair. Distinguished delegates, Excellencies, Zimbabwe has the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of Africa, plus Egypt, Sudan, Libya, and Somalia. At the outset, the Africa Group reaffirms its commitment to the PABS annex negotiations, guided by the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because we are. In the context of pandemics, the Ubuntu reflects a fundamental reality. Our health security is indivisible. A system that safeguards some while leaving others exposed is not only unjust, it is ineffective. For the Africa Group, equity and benefit sharing must be operational, enforceable, and central to pandemic agreement, including the PABS annex. These elements cannot be aspirational, deferred, or left to voluntary implementation. Past experiences has shown the consequences of such approaches. It is based on that experience that we call upon the discussion of the joint submission made by the Group for Equity and the Africa Group, a submission made by more than 85 member states, reflecting the 3 PABS contracts, SMTA1, SMTA2, and Access Contract, as we believe they are core to the discussion of the pathogens, access, and benefit sharing system. In our view, it is important that a submission by such a large number of member states be discussed in a formal setting to get an opportunity of receiving feedback from all parties, and if need be, changes be made as we proceed towards the development of an PABS system that will correct existing imbalances and inequalities. We therefore reiterate the call made by the joint regional statement of 85 plus countries for the inclusion of the discussion of the PABS contracts in the agenda of the IGWG 5 before its adoption. Countries that share pathogens, genomic data, and epidemiological information make a sovereign contribution to a global public good, often under conditions of uncertainty and risk. To that end, access without guaranteed returns undermines trust, discourages early reporting, and weakens collective preparedness. For the Africa Group, benefit sharing must therefore be trigger-based, activated at the point of access to pathogens and data, not subject to ad hoc decisions during crisis. Obligations must be clear, time-bound, and proportionate to the value derived. Equitable benefit sharing must include assured access to diagnostics, vaccines, therapeutics, and other medical countermeasures through multilateral mechanisms. Such access cannot be overridden by purchasing power, advanced PABS contracts, or export restrictions. Market-based allocations has failed in previous emergencies and must not define the future system. The Africa Group further underscores that technology transfer and know-how sharing are not optional, without binding commitments to expand regional and local manufacturing capacity, particularly in Africa. The PABS system will manage scarcity rather than correct it. Equity requires reducing dependence, not institutionalizing it. We caution against approaches that separate access from benefits, weaken obligations, or rely excessively on best endeavored language. Such models risk reproducing existing global inequalities under a new legal framework. A pandemic agreement that does not correct these structural imbalances will lack credibility and legitimacy. Trust is the currency of these negotiations. Trust will be built not through assurances, but through legal certainty, reciprocity, and enforceable commitments. Member states must be able to demonstrate to their people that participation in this framework delivers timely and tangible benefits, particularly in moments of crisis. As we commence IGWG 5, the Africa Group stands ready to engage constructively and in good faith. At the same time, we stress that equity and benefit sharing are not negotiating margins. They are the core test of this process. In the true spirit of Ubuntu, let us design a system that reflects our interdependence, not only in words, but in binding commitments that protect all. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mexico, please.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico would like to thank the participants of this IGWG 5. We're reaching this step with a clear conscience that time is running short. The responsibility that we have is significant. From here to May, we need to indicate that this process can be translated into tangible, balanced agreements that will be able to present a PABS annex that is robust to the 79th WHA for consideration. The conversations that we've been having so far, have allowed us to identify our differences as well as points of potentially reaching middle ground. The challenge is significant, but it is not that we go back and hash out again our differences. Rather, we need to focus on finding middle ground and being able to build solutions that respond to the legitimate concerns of all members. This requires political will, flexibility, and sincere discussions in which we are all open to listening. We believe that the success of this negotiation depends on our collective ability to continue working based on trust. The PABS system, if it wants to be effective, needs to be fair and equitable, allowing the exchange of pathogens across the system in a rapid, timely and fair manner, especially for countries that most need it. Both of these dimensions are inseparable and they need to be addressed with the same amount of commitment. At this key moment, Mexico would like to reiterate its availability, contribute to these negotiations and dialogue between blocs of countries, and we are looking forward to supporting wholeheartedly all these efforts. We look forward to we are convinced that with political will and pragmatism, we can reach the necessary consensus so that we can allow this process to conclude successfully and strengthen our multilateral stance for future pandemics.
Chair, co-chairs, I have the honor to deliver this statement. Co-chairs, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group for Equity. The regions of Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia align themselves with this statement. PABS is the heart of the pandemic agreement. If the heart is weak, the body cannot function, and the agreement will not deliver equity. We acknowledge the work reflected in the current draft, but we have to be honest, it still needs substantial strengthening. There are currently major loopholes that will prevent the system from functioning effectively. The annex cannot simply reproduce Article 12, or even worse, backtrack from it. The annex must articulate the operational details of the PABS system and provide legal clarity on the rights and obligations of the providers of PABS materials and sequence information, as well as various users of the system. We question how any terms and conditions can be enforced when users are permitted to remain anonymous. Many countries in the Global South are rich in biodiversity, and we are ready to contribute meaningfully to the PABS system in a manner that respects our sovereignty over our genetic resources. But our contribution to global health security must come with assurance that our genetic resources are accessed and used responsibly and transparently, and that participation in the system strengthens our ability to prevent, prepare for, and respond to future pandemics. This is why we need clearer terms on how PABS materials and sequence information may be used, including a well-defined scope of permitted use, firm conditions on onward sharing, and governance arrangements that ensure compliance with COP decision and prevent conflicts of interest. Benefit sharing from the system must be proportionate with level of access the system provides, and benefit sharing cannot rest on best endeavors. For a system built on trust, we need clear obligation. Equitable access to VTDs is essential, but we should also be serious about benefits that support timely, diversified regional and local production, including non-exclusive licensing to manufacturers in developing countries, transfer of technology, and meaningful collaboration in R&D. We are also ready to discuss annual monetary contribution in a way that is fair, predictable, and supports long-term sustainability of the system. Co-chair, together with the Africa Group, we have tabled 3 draft contracts as building blocks for operationalization of safe, accountable, and transparent system. We regret that time has not been allocated in formal session to consider them properly. We will welcome a dedicated discussion on these instruments. They are not meant to add complexity to the negotiation, but to help us translate principles into practice. We respectfully propose the contracts be discussed in a formal session of IGWG 5. Beyond contracts, we are also concerned by the growing list of issues being deferred to later processes, including terms and conditions for the WCLN and the PABS databases. We must correct the structural inequities inherent in the WCLN and existing databases if they are to form part of the system. If too much is left for later, we risk ending up with an annex that reads well, but does not work in practice. Legal certainty cannot be something we simply hope to settle down the road. It is essential for governments as they consider ratification. We understand the pressure of timelines, but we should also be clear about the choices and decisions in front of us. We are aiming for an annex by May that can actually deliver a functioning PABS system in totality. But if we cut too many corners now, we will pay for it later in credibility and implementation. We reaffirm our commitment to IGWG mandate to draft and negotiate PABS annex as a priority in line with WHO Resolution 78.1. And in that spirit, the best use of informal sessions would be to help bridge differences on PABS while taking up the issue of CFM at a later stage. Once again, we appeal for constructive engagement from all other IGWG members. We are here to build a system that countries will trust, use, and sustain. And we believe the pieces are within reach if we keep equity as our compass and do the necessary work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colombia, please.
Estimado presidente.
Distinguished co-chairs, distinguished colleagues, my name is Herman Velasquez. I am joining these negotiations. I've been appointed by the President of the Republic of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, as appointed to the WHO. Joining this group has been recent, and I'm joining a long past. I've worked for almost 20 years as a civil servant of the WHO, including beginning multilateral debates on IP, health, public health, and access to medicine. Colombia recognizes the importance of the work being conducted by the IGWG and our work over the last 3 years. However, we think that the current draft is not ambitious enough considering the operational needs of the system that will allow us to generate and distribute the benefits and access under the PABS annex for having the right tools to face future pandemics. For example, as was the case under the COVID-19 pandemic, when we saw significant gaps in the system, which certainly undermined equitable access to health products. These sorts of systems cannot be voluntary. We require strong multilateral tools that are legally binding in order to allow the fair sharing, access and benefit sharing as required. We need to make sure that the private pharmaceutical market and bilateral negotiations do not override this. We look forward to constructive and active participation in these negotiations, as has been the case since the beginning. We also want to ensure that the final document is substantial so that we can create a robust system under the PABS annex. And we want to ensure that monetary interests do not weaken the system. This is the only way that we can affront further pandemics in a robust and adequate manner. We need to take the time that we need to reach a legally binding, solid treaty before we move forward to building a PABS annex that ultimately will not respond to the needs and requirements of member states. We need to ensure that public health is robustly protected and that operationalization of our final document is possible so that we have the arsenal we require facing future pandemics.
A very constructive participation of your delegation. Now, before I continue giving the floor, we are under the consideration of the agenda. And we have heard, for example, calls for our time to be used for this and that subject. But do know that the proposed agenda has in item 2, the draft PABS annex. In principle, as the IGWG has other attributions other than the PABS annex, I need to hear from you at this stage, at the beginning of our discussions, and in order to approve the agenda, if you object to having that. If you do not, thank you. We will then take note of the fact that you all agree to discuss the draft PABS annex in this session. And that, I say, without prejudice to whatever you want to announce or intervene or reiterate at this stage. But please help me find out, or help the Bureau find out whether there is any objection to the proposed agenda. Item 1 is the opening, 2, the draft annex, the 3, proposals from member states of entities, and allow me to say that we have not received any proposals, so item 3 will not have any discussion or any need because there is no new proposal. Item 4 is next steps, so that's a continuation after IGWG 5, a report, and then the closing of the session. So please continue in your interventions, but try to help us identify whether there is any possible objection to that very succinct agenda. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. First, we don't object to the agenda, and we are helping you on that. I'm delivering this statement on behalf of the Eastern Mediterranean region. Co-chairs and esteemed vice chairs, we reaffirm our full commitment to the IGWG mandate and to concluding a pandemic agreement that is credible, equitable, and implementable. In this regard, the PABS Annex is essential to the agreement's integrity and effectiveness. For our region, PABS Annex is a core operational pillar. If the Annex does not function in practice, the agreement will not deliver on its promise of equity, solidarity, and shared responsibility. While we acknowledge the effort reflected in the current draft, we believe further strengthening is required. The Annex must go beyond restating principles and provide clear operational details and legal certainty on the right and obligation of provider and users of PABS material and sequence information. Legal clarity, enforceability, and transparency are essential to building trust and enabling implementation and ratification. Countries of the Eastern Mediterranean regions have consistently contributed to global health security, including through timely sharing sample data and expertise, often under complex and resource-constrained conditions. Our continued engagement must be matched by assurance that the access is governed responsibly and linked to tangible and predictable benefits that strengthen national and regional preparedness and response capacities. We therefore underscore the need for clear terms on permitted use, onward sharing, governance, and compliance. Excessive deferral of these elements risks an annex that is well-intentioned but weak in practice. On benefit sharing, we align with the principle that benefit must be proportionate to access, alongside access to VTDs should support sustainable regional and local production, capacity building, and meaningful collaboration in research and development. We are also ready to engage constructively on fair and predictable monetary contributions that support long-term sustainability of the system. Co-chairs, we note with concern the growing numbers of sensitive issues being deferred, including those related to WHO coordinated laboratory networks and PABS-related database. Addressing existing structural imbalances in these mechanisms is necessary to ensure trust and functionalities. While we recognize the pressure of timeline, finalizing Annex by May must not come at the expense of the functionality, legal certainty, and equity. The Eastern Mediterranean region remains committed to constructive engagement and bridging perspective. We believe a strong operational and equitable access at the PABS Annex is within reach if we combine ambitions with accountability and equity with implementation. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much. India.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I have the honor to take floor on behalf of the member states from the WHO Southeast Asia region. At the outset, we wish to express our sincere appreciation to the Bureau for its leadership and guidance, including the work undertaken during the intersessional period. While aligning with the statement delivered by Indonesia on behalf of the Group of Equity, allow me to make the following 3 broad points. First, as we approach closer to the deadline, we want to move forward and green as much text as possible. However, it is also essential that quality is not compromised by the pressure of timelines. Our priority must be an annex that provides clear legal certainty with minimum room for interpretive ambiguity. Such clarity is critical for effective implementation and long-term trust in multilateralism. While incentives for manufacturers and other users are often cited as the strongest incentive, the system should also offer access governed by predictable and legally certain benefit terms. Second, the annex must clearly articulate the operational details of the PABS system, including the legal rights and obligations of providers of PABS material and sequence information and of its various users across the value chain. We are concerned that terms and conditions cannot be meaningfully enforced if users remain anonymous or virtual with the advent of artificial intelligence. To ensure biosafety and biosecurity, traceability in all forms of access and subsequent use is essential to ensure accountability and trust. The operational aspects of access to pathogen materials and digital sequence information, public health purposes, as well as the associated benefits must be clearly defined. For this reason, more time is needed to discuss the draft standard contracts. Legal clarity is particularly important as this is the first time countries are undertaking binding obligation to share pathogen materials and sequence information. Third, the annex must clearly establish legally binding provisions governing the use of PABS material and sequence information. This requires a precisely defined scope of permitted use, enforceable conditions on onward sharing in any form, and the governance arrangement that ensure full compliance with the COP decisions and prevent conflicts of interest. Benefit sharing obligations must be proportionate to access and cannot be voluntary, aspirational, or based on best endeavors. Legal certainty, predictability, and enforceability are essential. Benefit sharing must extend beyond monetary contributions and donations of vaccines, diagnostic, and therapeutics. Non-monetary benefits, including timely capacity development, technical assistance, and non-exclusive manufacturing licenses for developing countries, must be clearly specified and apply both during pandemics and during the inter-pandemic period, including in the context of any fakes. Co-Chair, while we recognize the pressure to deliver results quickly, our objective must remain clear, an annex that is timely, but also capable of supporting a functional, equitable, and trusted PABS system. Legal and operational certainty are essential for governments as they assess the agreement and consider ratification. Informal consultations and cross-regional discussion should be used strategically to narrow differences and build understanding. In closing, we emphasize our shared goal of coming at a PABS system that countries trust, use, and sustain. This is achievable if equity remains our guiding principle and we commit to necessary work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this group statement. As I grant further the floor, please note that I'm going to stick strictly to the time allocated to individual delegations in order to respect the time and also the very costly availability of interpretation. So following the very good example of Zimbabwe at PBAC and Australia and the EB, I will have to ask you to conclude if you have already used the time that is granted to you. Ethiopia, please.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Ethiopia aligns itself with our regional statement delivered by Africa Group and that of the Group for Equity. Our expectation is to make a meaningful progress this week. We need to provide clarity and legal certainty to guide implementation of the PABS Annex and to facilitate the ratification and entry into force of the agreement. Because the entry into force of the pandemic agreement is dependent on the finalization and adoption of PABS. So finalization of PABS remains critical, as we all know. We strongly believe that we need to make progress in the operational part of the text that still has outstanding issues. So I think the agenda and the program of work somehow aligns with this one. So it is important to make Chair, to save time on the agenda and the program of work, I think the natural flow will be scope of terms, we agree, operational part, then we go to the governments. What we think is we first do the operational part, And then when we agree on the operational part, we can deal with the governance part at the final stage. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ethiopia. That will be done under the work program item. We're now trying to deliberate on the agenda. But thank you very much for your intervention. South Africa, please.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. South Africa aligns with the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa region and also the statement made by Indonesia on behalf of the Group for Equity. We welcome the program of work for IGWG 5 and appreciate the efforts of the Bureau. However, we note with concern that a critical component of the program, the contracts, are not explicitly mentioned in the agenda. As we negotiate the PABS annex, contracts are critical aspects that require thorough discussion. We therefore urge the Bureau to allocate specific time in the program of work for discussions on contracts. Furthermore, we emphasize the importance of robust governance arrangements under the COP to ensure effective implementation and oversight of the PABS annex. We believe this is it's essential to safeguard the interest of all parties, particularly developing countries. We also question the rationale behind allocating a significant portion of our time to informals. Whilst we recognize the value of informal discussions, we are concerned that this may limit our ability to engage in substantive negotiations on key issues, including contracts and governance arrangements. We clarify that the time allocated to IGWG informals cannot be used for expert informals organized by certain members, as this would undermine the transparency and inclusivity of our processes. Without explicit discussions on contracts and governance arrangements and clarity on the time allocation, we object to the agenda and cannot proceed. We believe this is essential to ensure our negotiations are comprehensive and effective. We look forward to the Bureau's respect and working with colleagues to finalize the program of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. South Africa, can I please ask you to clarify your objection to the discussion of item 2, draft PABS annex? As I explained, you are allowed obviously to object anything in the agenda, provided that you indicate to us what else would you like to discuss. We have a mandate, IGWG. In this mandate, we're supposed to do many things. As a priority, that is what is said in the resolution that created this group, we were asked to discuss as a priority this PABS annex. And then there are other issues that we have to discuss, the resolution and the preparation for the first COP and also the CFM. So can I ask you, in short of not being able to discuss item 2 of the agenda, that is the PABS annex, what item would South Africa like to discuss, please?
We have indicated in our intervention, co-chair, that we would like to see explicitly the discussions on contracts in the agenda.
Thank
you. We realize that item number 2 or number 3 may mean that, but our intervention is that it is very, very important for us to have a specific agenda item that focuses on those contracts. As stated by some of the colleagues that have intervened, many countries have called for these contracts to be explicitly looked at during these negotiations. And I have also raised a question. We want to understand if the Bureau may to explain to us why so much time has been allocated to informals. And we believe that, we do not have sufficient time. So if clarity can be provided on why so much time has been allocated to those specific informals.
Thank you, South Africa. South Africa, would you agree to proceed to the formal adoption of the agenda and then proceed to the discussion of the work program? Because I have the impression that your comments on the need to have an explicit mentioning of PABS contract entering the formal portion of our work program of work, then if you agree to that and not object to the idea of discussing in this 5th edition the annex, then we could maybe, if there is no other objection to the agenda itself, we could proceed to the formal adoption of the agenda and then immediately allow all of you to have a word on the work program, and so we can adjust, we can take note, and then we would allow us to also provide the clarity that has been asked. Right now, I'm willing to proceed to the adoption of the agenda if you do not object, as you have stated formally, South Africa.
Co-Chair, we do not object to the agenda, but we want detail in the program of work.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Before I give the floor to Namibia and following those delegations that are in our list, is there any formal objection to the agenda itself, so that if there's anybody in the room that does not want to discuss the PABS annex, for example, under item 2? If it's not the case, with your permission, we will formally proceed to the adoption of the agenda and then initiate a discussion on the program of work. Now, before also we initiate that discussion and we were asked to provide clarity on how we have proposed the program of work. One of the main reasons is that we cannot afford to have 3 sessions, morning, afternoon, and evening, entirely dedicated to formal discussions, because that would require interpretation. That means we would have to start at 9 and go all the way to 7:30 or even further with full interpretation. And as you know, we are operating under strict restrictions. That's the reason number 1. The reason number 2 is we do think that it's necessary to, yes, increase the instances, and we'll have every day, almost every day. I think only the last day on Saturday and the first one of the days, I think it's tonight, we will not have an evening session with formal discussions. So the work program was designed to allow you on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to have morning, afternoon, and evening formal discussions, but also morning and afternoon on Monday and Saturday. So we've multiplied the ways of us to formally, in closed meetings for member states only, to discuss formally and hopefully not only yellow, but also maybe attempt greening of text. So that is being allocated. Now, with regard to the request made by a very important group of delegations and now reiterated by some individually, one way to deal with this is, you will tell me if you agree to that. When we discuss section C, 2C, the chapeau has the following in yellow already. WHO PABS contracts for participating manufacturers shall include inter alia the following obligations. So this is one way to introduce a discussion of contracts formally, not only for participating manufacturers, but if you find fit for all of those that deal with PABS materials. So formally in our agenda, the way to allocate time is under the operational provisions of our annex, especially on 2C, but without prejudice to anything else. So I think it's a very important request that has been made. As we proceed to the discussion of the content of those contracts, I think it's fit for those that have a clear vision on how this contract should look like, and then allow them to present that formally. If that is agreeable, then that's how we would, as a Bureau, proceed to incorporate in the discussion of that and any other matter that you find necessary to specify or to give proper attention formally or informally in our program of work. Namibia, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Namibia is honored to take the floor at the opening of the 5th meeting of the Intergovernmental Working Group. At the onset, Namibia reaffirms its strong commitment to the mandate of this process and to the pandemic agreement that strengthens global preparedness and response under the authority of the WHO. We would also like to align with the statements of the Africa Group and the Group for Equity. Namibia approaches these negotiations in the spirit of Harambee, pulling together. Harambee reflects collective effort, shared responsibility, and mutual accountability. It reminds us that in the face of pandemics, no country can stand alone, and no response can succeed if it is uneven or fragmented. Recent global health emergencies have demonstrated that solidarity cannot be improvised in moments of crisis. It must be designed into the system. Where access to life-saving tools was delayed or unequal, the global response was weakened. IGWG 5 therefore provides a critical opportunity to correct these shortcomings. Namibia underscores that equity and benefit sharing must be operational, predictable, and central to the pandemic agreement, including the PABS annex. Countries that share pathogens, data, and early warning information provide a global good. These contributions must be matched by timely and tangible benefits, particularly access to diagnostics, vaccines, therapeutics, and the means to produce them. Namibia speaks from direct national experience. We have enacted and operationalized comprehensive national access and benefit sharing legislation covering biological and genetic resources, including microbial resources, digital sequence information, and derivatives. Our Access to Biological and Genetic Resources and Associated Traditional Knowledge Act No. 2 of 2017 demonstrates clearly that enforceable benefit sharing for genetic resources, including pathogen materials, is not aspirational, it is already operational. Equal footing is therefore non-negotiable. A PABS system that guarantees access without equivalent guarantees for benefits would repeat the mistakes of the past. Benefit sharing cannot depend on purchasing power, ad hoc arrangements, or discretionary decisions taken during emergencies. It must be triggered by access, governed by multilateral rules, and delivered when it matters most. Namibia also places strong emphasis on technology transfer and regional manufacturing capacity. Strengthening local and regional production is essential to reducing dependency and building the real resilience. Without this, preparedness will remain uneven and vulnerability entrenched. We stress the importance of legal clarity and trust. The credibility of this agreement will depend on clear obligations, transparency, and equitable outcomes. With this, Namibia stands ready to engage constructively and in good faith in the true spirit of Harambee. Let us pull together to deliver a pandemic agreement that is fair, credible, and fit for purpose. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Angola, please.
Thank you, Chair. In alignment with AFNA Group, Angola recognizes the importance of PABS system as one of the fundamental pillars for a global response to future pandemic. Rapid sharing and pathogen and scientific information produce sustainable results when based on clear principles of trust, transparency, and equity. In this context, Angola calls all member states to continue working constructively to ensure equal opportunity in assessing the benefits resulting from sharing of pathogens, avoiding fragmental approach or bilateral practice that could compromise international solidarity. Chair, Angola believes in the leadership of WHO and recalls that multilateralism is the best way to address global health threats. A multilateral, inclusive and operational PABS will ensure that all countries, regardless their level of development, can contribute to global health security. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Angola. Thank you very much, Angola. European Union, please.
You're right. Thanks, Co-Chair, and good morning to all colleagues. We want to, as always, start off by thanking the Bureau as well as Secretariat for all their hard work and for enabling us to continue working towards the objective of concluding this process. So thanks a lot for that. I will be relatively brief in order to enable us to commence our substantive discussions and start to address the many still outstanding issues. But nevertheless, we want to make it clear that we remain deeply committed to work towards an effective, workable and implementable PABS system in the remaining 12 days of negotiations that we have at our disposal. We hope for constructive discussions with all of you during this meeting, and we also hope that a sense of pragmatism and common sense will help to guide us towards convergence in the key remaining outstanding areas for the purpose of bringing this process to a successful conclusion within the time frame that we have been allocated. So we look forward to commencing the substantive discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. Zambia aligns with the statement delivered by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group. Chair, it seems like yesterday when we all gave a standing ovation for the formal adoption of the WHO pandemic agreement during the 78th World Health Assembly in May 2025. The formal adoption of the pandemic agreement, though through a vote, demonstrated to the world our collective commitment to strengthening global health security, equity, and international cooperation. We need to sustain that momentum in order to reach consensus on elements that would operationalize Article 12 of the Pandemic Treaty, which is a critical prerequisite for opening the treaty for signature and ratification. While appreciating our continued dialogue and efforts, Zambia notes with concern the slow progress that we have made since July 2025. With the 79th World Assembly soon approaching, we need to prioritize our deliverables of Resolution 78.1, which mandated us to draft and negotiate the annex on the PABS. We need to focus on building convergence on the text of the PABS annex. While we recognize the importance of informal discussions and their inclusion in the program of work, such discussions should not be at the expense of progress in a formal setting. Zambia remains committed to the negotiation process and to engaging in constructive and focused discussions with the view of reaching consensus on the PABS annex. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Zambia. The floor is now offered to France.
Co-Chair, thank you very much. I would like to commend your work as a co-chair. I know that this requires a great amount of work and a great amount of responsibility, so we'd like to thank you in particular, as well as all the members of the Bureau. We support the statement that has been made by the European Union. I would like to thank the Member States for adopting the agenda this week, in particular item 2 on the draft PABS annex. There have been specific requests made this morning. I think that the work programme can offer us flexibility. Thank you very much for the proposals made. However, we would like to recall that collectively we have the responsibility to make quick progress, and we need to adopt this annex by the next World Health Assembly. In particular, given the time remaining, we think that we need to be reasonable in terms of the amendments we make to the text, as well as the length of our discussions. For this end, we would like to invite Member States to not reopen subjects or provisions which were adopted as part of the pandemic agreement already, because this might mean that we lose the progress that we have made collectively, and there might also be a risk that we do not conclude our negotiations in the necessary time frame, and the pandemic agreement will not be able to be implemented. We have undertaken the presidency of the G7, and France is greatly engaged to ensure that we have progress in negotiations and that we take account of all of the concerns of Member States. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for your generous words and encouragement. And I think it's important as we proceed to discussing the program of work and adopting it. First, allow me to remind you that the program that was proposed would imply some sessions being webcast and others not webcast, or some discussions. So discussions on item 1, that is the opening, and item 6, report of the meeting, and 7, closure, would be public webcast, and relevant stakeholders would be obviously invited to observe the discussions. Now, agenda item 2, that is draft PABS annex, will not be a public webcast because this is for member states and associate members and regional economic integration organizations only, and the observer delegations of Palestine and the Holy See. As I have mentioned, there is no need for discussion on item 3, either webcast or not, and if there were, it would be non-webcast also. So we also take note of the desire to explicitly tackle contracts and our program in the formal discussions. As I have tried to indicate in our work program, we made room for that under the section 2, all of it, because some of you may claim that you need to have contracts not only for benefit sharing, but also for access. So in either of the sessions or discussions on section 2, this is, and then this, you have the word of the Bureau to open space formally for that discussion to take place, obviously allowing for all of the views to come on board as we tackle that item, and also with a view to finding a consensus, not exacerbating any distance or polarization. And with that in mind, and bearing in mind also the need for the necessary flexibility as we progress in our discussions, may I take that the room is ready to adopt the work program as proposed provisionally? There's no formal objection. We'll proceed in that manner. Thank you very much. Now, I would also like to remind you of the proposed working hours as reflected in the work program. And as I said, we will be using the traffic light system. See, it's very, not only inelegant, but also sometimes too harsh to cut the word. I like the UNESCO idea when you play a national music to remind, for Brazil, there's the samba. So when you hear the samba, it means you have overstepped your time allocated to you. Here we haven't any, but it is necessary for us to respect the time that we have for the discussions. I know sometimes it's difficult to be concise and to organize, but please try to come with your ideas in a way that is already systematized and you bring something new. And if you agree to the previous speaker, please say so. I agree with what has been said by delegation X and Y. That would help us really proceed to this very disciplined and structured ways. Now, delegates participating virtually are reminded that in order to ensure appropriate sound quality for the benefit of all participants and interpreters alike, proper equipment and connection must be used. The minimum requirements being for remote participants, a USB-connected unidirectional microphone, headphones, and a strong and stable internet connection and a quiet location. Please be advised that where sound quality does not allow for reliable interpretation or poses a risk to the interpreter's auditory health, that is very important, they will suspend service. And kindly send your statements in advance to interpret@who.int. If you agree, we can proceed in that manner. I see no objection. That concludes the consideration of agenda item 1. We will now have an open session with relevant stakeholders. So we are honored and satisfied to have the presence of stakeholders, and then we would then allow, knowing that we are operating at a very strict time and availability of interpretation, but it would be a shame not to benefit from your insights and advices, and also substantive points of view. The floor is open. Medicus Mundi, you have the floor.
IGWG members, we appreciate the work done so far, but remain concerned that the current draft fails to support an effective and equitable PPR regime. We urge you to take inspiration from the already existing PIP framework, but also address its operational gaps. Unfortunately, the on-screen text indicates a PIP- draft is in the making. Prevent biopiracy and biosecurity threats via tracing mechanism and legally binding contracts for commercial and non-commercial use. Ensure any recipients of PABS material or sequence information, including through onward transfers, is under legally binding obligations to provide benefit sharing. Refrain from relying on external databases not accountable to WHO and member states. This would promote data fragmentation, compromise rapid research, and offer no guarantee of continued access to all researchers. We call upon IGWG members and Bureau to examine whether the experts they consult in these regards are free from conflicts of interest, ensure access to VTDs to prevent and contain fakes, increase transparency by strengthening civil society participation, and make tomorrow's stakeholder consultation inclusive, providing opportunities to everyone to present their views. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moody, for the sheer fact that we operate under Article 19, that's a PA in the annex, already puts this exercise way above, legally speaking, in comparison to the PIP framework. Number two, if we agree that the PPP, the pathogens with pandemic potential, are a lot more than just one single family of pathogen, then obviously we are operating to enlarge these discussion and the deliberation and provisions on so many more pathogens than just influenza. So I just thought that it was necessary when you said that we are operating, we're creating a PIP-. Born Free Foundation, please.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished delegates. Alongside our colleagues in the Pandemics and Animal Welfare Group of NGOs, Born Free welcomes the opportunity to reaffirm our strong support for the pandemic agreement and the ongoing work of the Intergovernmental Working Group on pathogen access and benefit sharing. We commend the progress made by the working group and urge member states to sustain this momentum through constructive dialogue, compromise and pragmatic problem solving in order to achieve consensus on a PABS system that ensures the rapid sharing of information, equitable benefit sharing, legal clarity and workable obligations. An effective PABS system is essential to the integrity and effectiveness of the pandemics agreement. Informal cross-regional engagement and early bridging of perspectives drawing on expertise from One Health, veterinary science, legal and manufacturing sectors will be key to reaching technically robust and widely supported outcomes. Born Free and our colleagues remain committed to supporting this process, and as negotiations move forward, we emphasise the critical importance of concluding the annex negotiations in a timely manner, enabling the pandemics agreement to be open for signature and ratification at the May meeting of the World Health Assembly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Medicines, Law and Policy, please.
Good morning, co-chair and delegates. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I'll try to be as brief as possible, and perhaps we can have a bit more time together on Wednesday. My comments address the issues related to technology transfer and IP licensing. That's a subject that we've been following since the beginning of the negotiations of the pandemic agreement, in particular since COVID-19 pandemic showed us the difficulties that manufacturers, in particular those in developing countries, but also others producing for developing countries, had to obtain the necessary technology and know-how in order to meaningfully contribute. Now, the provisions for technology transfer in the pandemic agreement are not strong. And at the first IGWG session, I expressed the wish and hope that this was an opportunity, perhaps talks are an opportunity to further strengthen that. But in the last draft of the PABS annex, it actually seems to further cement the notion that tech transfer can only be on voluntary and mutually agreed terms, or VMAT. One even finds this qualifier in articles that are meant to formulate clear obligations, which is a contradiction in the text. I only now see the timer. Have I run out of time, Mr. Co-Chair?
Unfortunately, yes, but please conclude.
Oh, thank you. Two more points. Voluntary tech transfer and licensing is very important. In the absence of it, governments need to be able to intervene. We have documented that what has happened over the last 2 decades, the use of what is known as the TRIPS flexibilities papers recently published in the British Medical Journal Global Health. And we're happy to share this paper with the Bureau and the delegates. And I look forward to our continued conversations on Wednesday. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much. And to all of you who have yet to speak, we thank you for sharing your contributions with us as briefly as possible within the time constraints. Pandemic Action Network, please, to be followed by GISAID.
Resilience Action Network International and 4POS welcome the start of IGWG 5, a critical week of negotiations in which we need to see further alignment and progress towards a final text. We're counting on member states to find solutions to deliver an equitable and effective PABS annex for this year's World Health Assembly. The PABS annex remains vital to building a more equitable ecosystem for access to countermeasures. And we call on high-income countries in particular to hold themselves accountable to the promises they made to right the egregious wrongs of the COVID pandemic. Landing a final PABS annex will also be key to advancing the many gains for global solidarity achieved in the pandemic agreement. For supply chains, surveillance, R&D, clinical trials, coordinated financing, and more. At a time of increased geopolitical tensions and threats to multilateralism, we need solidarity for health security more than ever, and we are counting on countries to deliver a positive result. For our part, as civil society, we commit to working with you towards this goal, being on hand to provide access to expertise in our networks and to helping get the pandemic agreement ratified when the time comes. As we look toward the UN high-level meeting on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response this September, WHO member states must keep up the momentum and drive tangible action for our shared resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. GISAID, please, to be followed by Geneva Global Health Hub.
Thank you very much, Chair. GISAID wishes to thank the participants in this process and would like to remind that the initiative started 18 years ago, almost in a very similar situation when data sharing was in doubt and those in possession of very valuable data were reluctant to share because of the lack of transparency. We'd like to present to you that there's a legally binding data access agreement. This agreement was forged with member states that are participating, some those that have left the WHO as a member. And in this agreement, one of the core elements is, one, that data, a derivative in the case of GISAID from a pathogen, is the property of the data provider. It assures that ownership. The other one is the transparency that only individuals, pretty much to a driver's license, somebody can get a car, is issued to an individual. This has allowed GISAID for the 18 years to basically have responded to at least 2 pandemics and major outbreaks. As recently as just a week ago, I think, when we had the Nipah virus, working together with our colleagues in Pune, where we provided a platform within hours. So this platform, I think, is a very important platform for the countries to consider because they have invested in that platform for the past 18 years. And any benefit and access sharing regime should pay very close attention to the fact that transparent data sharing is an essential element, not just related to WHO, it's also biosecurity. It wards off also dual use and other matters of abuse of these data by bad actors.
Thank you. Could you please conclude?
And in closing, I would like to say this idea, and this I point at the PIP framework, they have in 5.2.2 an element that relates to what is public domain and what is open. So open data sharing, and I hope the German government can talk about this, they see it in front of me, and give an idea why they changed from transparent data sharing to now what they just call open, and what in fact is anonymous data sharing. Where is the benefit and how are you going to enforce that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we will have further opportunities to exchange. I appreciate the time is tight. Geneva Global Health Hub, please, to be followed by Pathoplexus.
G2H2 notes that these IGWG negotiations are central to revamping the spirit of equity, international solidarity, and a multilateralism facing headwinds, and must draw lessons from the last pandemic. Thus, we urge you to maintain broad definitions for PABS materials and sequence information in the current Para 1BB, and participating manufacturers under Para 1BC should include those who develop VTDs, even if they are not manufacturers, to avoid WHO scrambling for VTDs during emergencies. Ensure every entity getting access signs transparent contracts which strengthen public oversight without scientific data extractivism. Make benefit sharing as envisaged in C1C33 for preventing facts and pandemics mandatory. Establish a WHO-managed database and also vest WHO with the sole authority of sub-licensing all non-exclusive licenses shared as benefits. Build on the Nagoya Protocol's pillars as a subsisting foundational international instrument. And finally, make the PABS system binding and equally applicable to all parties to the PA with compulsory mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pathoplexus, please, to be followed by the independent panel.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. On behalf of Pathoplexus, I would like to thank the room for accepting us as a new relevant stakeholder. We are a rather new organization and database for sharing virus sequencing data formed by scientists and public health professionals working with sequencing data coming from currently 14 different countries from different regions of the world. Our members have direct experience with generating, analyzing, and sharing pathogen data, and have been discussing a lot in our communities how to align proper acknowledgement of data submitters and effective utilization of the data. So we are honored to be here, and we hope very much that we can contribute in some ways to these highly important discussions to find an equitable PABS systems to fight and maybe even prevent the next pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response to be followed by IFPMA, please.
Thank you. In 2021, the independent panel was unequivocal. To prevent another devastating pandemic, the world must come together. We called for a framework convention as the foundation for new fit-for-purpose rules to make every country and person safer. For almost 4 years, member states and the bureaus have worked to turn that vision into reality. But only when words become action does the world become safer. We're not there yet, and we must continue to make progress. We recognize the profound strain on the multilateral system today. Yet, despite the difficulties, we must strive to come together to combat threats like pandemics. This is why the PABS negotiations matter. No patchwork of bilateral agreements or national efforts can substitute for it. So as you come together this week, we urge you to find the common ground needed to deliver a meaningful, equitable, and workable agreement. Always keep in mind the countries that suffered inequity. It's your responsibility to close the gaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. IFPMA now to be followed by SEPI, please.
Thank you. We remain concerned that the stacked and overlapping obligations within the current PABS architecture risk disincentivizing research at the very moment when the world needs strong and agile R&D ecosystems. The system's complexity combined with remaining uncertainty on scope creates barriers that could slow innovation rather than accelerate preparedness. Regarding the definition of pathogens with pandemic potential, the latest Bureau text ties the definition directly to the draft pandemic agreement's definition of a pandemic emergency. As drafted, a pandemic emergency is determined through broad criteria on geographic spread, excessive pressure on health systems, socioeconomic disruption, and the need for rapid international action. These concepts are important, but lack scientific precision and allow significantly interpretive flexibility, both technical and political. Without measurable epidemiological thresholds, the definition could be applied inconsistently or overly expensively. This ambiguity produces real and immediate challenges. It's not clear that technology platforms, commonly used bacterial families or non-acute pathogens, are explicitly carved out. There is a genuine risk that materials essential for everyday scientific work could inadvertently fall within scope. I think we have a statement that is much longer, so you can find it on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness International, please, to be followed by Gavi.
Thank you, Vice Chair. CEPI sees the PABS frameworks as complementary to the 100 Days mission. We support rapid and timely sharing of PABS materials and sequence information, as well as engaging originating laboratories for co-authorship in publications and acknowledging their contributions. We propose the following commitments that support R&D and equitable access and would not disincentivize innovation. First, submit marketing authorization application dossiers concurrently to multiple regulatory agencies in outbreak-impacted countries. Second, make available approved vaccines for use as comparator products in clinical trials once the first marketing authorization is granted. Third, agree to principles during a FAQ, which could clarify when a participating manufacturer should supply products or establish appropriate clinical trials in outbreak-affected countries. Review emerging data to update marketing authorizations, or identify an experienced regional partner for technology transfer. We stand ready to bring our experience to help operationalize PABS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gavi, to be followed by the Third World Network, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Gavi appreciates the opportunity to contribute to this Intergovernmental Working Group. We welcome the commitments to benefit sharing provisions both for pandemic emergencies and for public health emergencies of international concern. We also value the recognition within the governance section of the need to collaborate with international organizations and stakeholders in coordinating and operating the PABS system. This collaboration should reinforce the ongoing reform of the global health architecture, ensuring that the pandemic agreement is implemented through a structure that is coherent, operationally clear, and capable of leveraging the comparative strengths of each partner. Gavi encourages member states to conclude negotiations by the upcoming World Health Assembly, and we will look forward to contributing to the development of the terms of reference for the coordinating financial mechanism and the global supply chain and logistics network. Gavi stands ready to bring the full strength of our vaccine alliance to these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Third World Network, to be followed by the Medicines Patent Pool Foundation.
Thank you for the platform. We appreciate the efforts of Member States and Bureau. However, we have to express our fears that the annex risk backtracking from the Article 12 commitments on legal certainty, traceability, and access to VTDs necessary to prevent PHEIC and pandemic emergencies. Under the pretext of building a multilateral system larger than PIP framework, IGWG members are advised to move away from PIP best practices, including standardized contracts. This is without a justifiable reason when we look at the plant treaty covering several million accessions over 64 food crops operates through a fully standard contract. Abandoning standardized contracts will delay research and innovation and increase biopiracy biosecurity risk. Scientists have confirmed contracts and user registration do not hinder science and are calling for governmental intervention to curb extravagant practices in current research ecosystem. Only a small section of stakeholders invested in defending database infrastructures that facilitate digital biopiracy and shift data access control to global north are arguing against user registration. We would finally just take note of with concern that some member states are hosting events in WHO premises, events with selected stakeholders during the time reserved for IGWG negotiations. We call upon Bureau and WHO to ensure IGWG meetings, formal or informal, with stakeholders be open, inclusive, and allow equal participation for all stakeholders. We reiterate in the PABS, scientists, researchers, and database managers are stakeholders, not neutral experts, as they will be the ones who will be required to sign PABS contracts once the system is operationalized. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Medicines Patent Pool Foundation to be followed by MSF. That's the last request I have. So if anybody else wants to take the floor, please indicate now. Medicines Patent Pool, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have a comment regarding additional benefits provided for Article 12.8, including non-exclusive licensing and technology transfer. A way to implement those areas can be through a mRNA technology transfer program co-led by WHO and MPP with participation of 16 countries. Initially established to address inequitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, the program has evolved. Significant progress has been achieved. Establishment of Technology Transfer Center, global network of 16 manufacturers, sharing mRNA technology platform, and creation of manufacturing capacity. The program is now well placed to strengthen regional manufacturing and contribute to future pandemic preparedness and response, with potential collective output exceeding 1.9 billion doses by 2030. We would therefore respectfully propose that WHO MPP mRNA technology transfer program be taken into consideration within the PABS benefit sharing system as a practical means of translating commitments into timely and tangible outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now MSF, please.
Thank you, Chair. Drawing on its frontline experiences, MSF has consistently advocated for WHO pandemic agreement to establish a multilateral mechanism that ensures fair and equitable sharing of benefits in exchange for access to pathogens and generic resources for R&D. A WHO-led multilateral PABS system is essential for ensuring reliable, equitable, and accountable access and benefit sharing that reflect the collective contribution and global solidarity. We consider a strong and effective PABS mechanism should include the following aspects. One, access to pathogen material and data should be based on clear and enforceable benefit sharing obligations and terms and conditions agreed upfront. To non-exclusive licensing on to WHO or WHO-supported initiative to facilitate tech transfer and diversified production must be included as an essential benefit sharing obligation. 3, PABS implementation should be substantively connected with Article 13 of the Pandemic Agreement to facilitate coordinated stockpiling and equitable allocation, including for humanitarian needs. Finally, member states and PABS should provide public access to information on recipients of public material and data, agreements signed with manufacturers and other participants, and the regulatory approval information. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. Let me, on behalf of the Bureau, thank all the relevant stakeholders for your presence here with us. We benefit so much from the expertise, the experiences, the perspectives that you bring. We know it's much more than you can share in 1 minute with us this morning, so we look forward to the many exchanges that we'll have throughout the week in this room formally on Wednesday and on Friday, but also no doubt many informal exchanges in the margins with the benefit of your presence here. Let me also just take the opportunity before handing back to Ambassador Tova to thank all the member states who reaffirmed your commitment this morning to the work we need to do together. We are very conscious as a Bureau that there is not one delegation in this room who is happy with the on-screen text as it is. That's the nature of the process. We're here to work together to turn this into something that we can adopt by consensus together in May, and we're counting on you all to be here with the spirit of solutions to do that. I think we have one more relevant stakeholder wanting to take the floor, but could I also just thank the Secretariat for going above and beyond to support us in this process. You will note we have squeezed the absolute maximum out of our time. As Ambassador Tova said, we have 3 sessions of formal work each day. Not only that, we have coffee and tea outside the room, which should facilitate us, so we're really counting on everybody to work very hard. But now, before we conclude and break to get into our substantive work, we have 2 more. We have South Center and Public Services International, and then we're going to break and get into our substantive business. So please, South Center, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We are deeply concerned about the fundamental imbalance in the Bureau's text as of 22nd January. While parties would have binding obligations for rapid sharing of pathogen materials and sequence information, benefit sharing remains entirely voluntary. Parties have no obligation to spur manufacturers to sign WHO PABS contracts, which should contain standard terms and conditions, nor to enforce them once signed. This ignores the equal footing principle mandated by Article 12 of the Pandemic Agreement. The methodology of Bureau-led textual proposals can lead to imbalanced outcomes. For instance, the detailed proposals for the standard material transfer agreements and data sharing agreements by the African Group and the Group of Equity are not reflected in the current text. Technology transfer must be central to PABS obligations, not merely a voluntary endeavor. The PABS system in particular must include PABS party obligations to provide access to sequencing technologies, genomic analysis tools, and infrastructure on favorable terms for developing countries. If benefit sharing remains voluntary, then access to PABS materials and sequence information should likewise be voluntary to ensure both pillars operate on equal footing. Thank you.
Thank you. South Centre Public Services International, please.
Thank you, Chair. Public Services International.
Wait 1 second, please.
It's working? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Public Services International is a global union federation representing more than 15 million healthcare workers around the world. We have concerns with the text. The PABS system must be administered multilaterally by WHO and the democratic member state oversight. Voluntary commitments have proven ineffective. All recipients of PABS materials and/or sequence information must undertake legally binding terms of use. All actors accessing pathogens and data must sign standardized contracts with clear, transparent, public, and audible terms. WHO IGWG should make multilateral PABS more attractive than bilateral bargain by establishing meaningful benefit-sharing commitments and robust government and accountability mechanisms. Finally, countries have sovereign rights over their genetic resources and sequence information established by the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol. Appropriate access is indisputable objectives of CDB and Nagoya Protocol and must be included in the PABS annex so that the pandemic agreement really goes above the status quo and avoid the vaccine apartheid we saw in the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vice Chair Madeleine Hayworth. We have heard you, and we recognize that it's very little time that we have granted you this morning, but thank you because you were able to, in a very concise manner, to convey to us very important points. Do know that one of the reasons why you may have been perceiving that there are loopholes or incomplete text is that we are ourselves still not in a position to have full text. That's why we are eager to go immediately to substantive discussions on the provisions of the text right now. But we thank you very much. I have an appeal to make to those organizing informal meetings involving stakeholders. They obviously should be inclusive and open because this is the nature of this House. Obviously, member states are able to do that in their regional groups, in closed doors, but when it comes to stakeholders, the use of these premises of WHO should be guided by inclusiveness and open access. With that, I will thank all of you for your participation in this beginning of our deliberations. And I now close this discussion under item 1, and then we will proceed to item 2 in a closed session, and we'll allow 5 minutes for the room to be prepared. Thank you very much.